The afternoon sun poured through the kitchen window as Beth stirred her coffee, watching her mom try on her wedding veil for the 5th time that week. At 38, Susan Carter couldn't stop smiling these days. Her cheeks had a glow that Beth hadn't seen in years, not since before her dad left them high and dry when she was just 7 years old. "What do you think, honey? Too much?" Susan asked, twirling in the small kitchen. The delicate lace veil caught the sunlight, casting tiny patterns on the faded wallpaper. Beth forced a smile. "It looks nice, Mom." Nice wasn't the problem. Everything about this wedding looked nice on the surface. The flowers were ordered, the small church was booked, and her mom's dress hung protected in the closet. The problem was the groom, Tom Reynolds, the man who had swept into their lives just 8 months ago and somehow convinced her mother that he was her second chance at happiness. Beth watched as her mom carefully removed the veil, folding it back into its box with the care someone might give a newborn baby. At 16, Beth considered herself a pretty good judge of character. You had to be when you'd spent most of your life watching your single mom struggle, seeing her date men who weren't worth her time. But something about Tom felt different, and not in a good way. "He called earlier," Susan said, breaking into Beth's thoughts. "He's finishing up a meeting with another client and then bringing dinner. Isn't that thoughtful?" Beth nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Tom was always thoughtful in ways that cost him nothing but earned him endless praise. The financial advisor had appeared in their lives like a miracle, handsome, successful, and seemingly crazy about her mom. Everyone loved him, her mom's friends, their neighbors, even her grandparents who visited last month and declared him a real catch. Only Beth seemed to notice how his smile never quite reached his eyes, how he checked his phone constantly but always angled it away from view, how he had 3 different explanations for why he couldn't take them to his hometown over the holidays. "Did you finish your homework?" Susan asked, putting away the veil box and checking her reflection in the small mirror by the fridge. "Tom said he might be able to help you with that math problem set if you're still struggling." "I figured it out," Beth lied. She'd rather fail math than spend another evening sitting next to Tom as he explained things in that slow, condescending voice, his hand occasionally resting on her shoulder a second too long. Outside, tires crunched on the gravel driveway. Susan's face lit up instantly. "He's early." Beth watched her mother practically skip to the door, smoothing her hair and clothes as she went. The transformation never failed to amaze her. How her strong, independent mother turned into a giggling schoolgirl around Tom. The front door opened, and Tom's deep voice filled the small house. "There's my beautiful bride-to-be." Beth slipped out the back door to the porch, needing air. The wedding was just 3 days away. 3 days until this man officially became her stepfather. 3 days until he moved from his fancy downtown apartment into their modest house. 3 days until whatever game he was playing reached its next level. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photos she'd secretly taken 2 weeks ago, Tom coming out of a jewelry store with a woman who definitely wasn't her mother. They hadn't kissed or held hands, but something in their body language seemed familiar, comfortable. When Beth had casually mentioned seeing him downtown that day, he claimed he was at a conference in the next state. The back door creaked open. "There you are," Tom said, his voice warm but his eyes cold as always. "Your mom says dinner's ready. I brought your favorite." Beth nodded and stood up. "Thanks." He stepped closer, blocking her path slightly. 3 more days and we'll be family. Isn't that great?" Beth met his gaze steadily. "Can't wait." As she brushed past him into the house, Beth made a silent promise to herself. She had 3 days to figure out who Tom Reynolds really was before her mother made the biggest mistake of her life. The next morning, Beth woke up with a knot in her stomach. Only 2 days left before the wedding. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through her photos again, lingering on the one showing Tom with the mystery woman. What was he hiding? Beth got dressed quickly and headed downstairs where she found her mom humming while arranging flowers for the rehearsal dinner. "Morning, sweetheart. I made pancakes," Susan said, gesturing toward a plate on the counter. "Thanks, Mom." Beth sat down, pushing the pancakes around her plate. "So, where's Tom today?" "He had to drive to Riverdale for a client meeting. He'll be back tonight for dinner with the Wilsons." Susan stepped back to admire her flower arrangement. "Isn't it beautiful?" "Tom picked these up yesterday." Beth nodded, wondering if she should say something now. But what exactly? That she didn't trust her mom's fiancé because he sometimes took calls in another room. That didn't seem like enough. I'm going to meet up with Jenny at the library, Beth said, standing up. We have a project due next week. This wasn't entirely a lie. She did have a project, but meeting Jenny wasn't part of today's plan. Instead, Beth rode her bike straight to downtown, to Tom's office building. She'd never actually been inside before. Tom always met them elsewhere or came to their house. The fancy glass building intimidated her as she locked her bike and walked inside. At the directory, she found it. Reynolds Financial Services, Suite 305. Beth took the elevator up, her heart pounding. The small reception area was empty. A desk with a computer, some chairs, a few finance magazines. Nothing suspicious. Beth was about to leave when she heard voices from behind a door. I told you, I can't move that kind of money until next week, a voice said. Tom's voice, but different somehow, harder, colder. After the wedding, I'll have access to everything. Beth froze. Access to what? Her mom didn't have much money, just some savings and the small life insurance policy from when her dad died. The door handle turned. Beth panicked and ducked behind a large plant just as Tom emerged with a man she'd never seen before. Remember, this needs to look clean, the stranger said. The last time. Won't happen again. Tom cut him off sharply. I've been careful. The daughter's suspicious, but the mother trusts me completely. Beth's blood ran cold. They were talking about her and her mom. Just get the signatures at the wedding. Once the accounts are transferred, we'll move everything offshore, the man said, clapping Tom on the shoulder before leaving. After they left, Beth waited a few minutes, heart racing, then slipped out. On wobbly legs, she made it to her bike and pedaled home as fast as she could, mind whirling. That evening, Tom arrived with a bottle of wine and takeout food. Beth watched him charm her mother and the Wilsons, their neighbors who would be attending the wedding. Mr. Wilson had recently retired with a decent pension, which Tom had apparently been helping him invest. You're awfully quiet tonight, Tom said to Beth during dinner, his smile not reaching his eyes. Everything okay at school? Fine, Beth mumbled. Just tired. Later, while helping her mom with dishes, Beth tried again. Mom, don't you think it's weird that none of Tom's family is coming to the wedding? Susan sighed. We've been over this. His parents passed away, and his sister lives in Australia. It's too far to travel on short notice. Has he ever shown you pictures of his sister or his parents? Beth, enough. Susan put down the dish towel. I know this is hard for you, but Tom makes me happy. Why can't you just accept that? Beth bit her lip. I just want you to be sure, Mom. That night, Beth couldn't sleep. She crept downstairs and found Tom's briefcase by the door. Looking over her shoulder, she carefully clicked it open. Inside were folders with names she recognized. The Wilsons, their other neighbors the Pattles, even her mom's best friend Diane. All people with retirement funds or insurance money. All people Tom had charmed. Beth was about to close the briefcase when she noticed something else. A small, worn photo showing a younger Tom with his arm around a woman. They were smiling in front of a house. On the back, written in faded ink, Our new home, April 2018. The problem. Tom had told everyone he'd never been married, and April 2018 was only 4 years ago. Beth took a quick picture of the photo with her phone and carefully put everything back. As she tiptoed back upstairs, she knew she needed to do more than just gather suspicions. She needed real proof, and fast. Beth barely slept that night, her mind racing with what she'd discovered. When morning came, she had a plan. The wedding was tomorrow, which meant today was her last chance to find real proof about Tom's true identity. I'm taking Beth shopping for some last-minute stuff, her mom told Tom over breakfast. Want to come along? Can't, sweetheart. Got to finalize some paperwork at the office, Tom replied, kissing Susan's cheek. Wedding stuff doesn't sign itself. Beth noticed how he avoided specifics. What paperwork? She'd seen the marriage license already filled out on her mom's desk. After Tom left, Beth pretended to be excited about shopping. They spent 3 hours at the mall, and by the time they got home, Beth was antsy to put her plan into action. Mom, I forgot my phone charger at Jenny's house from yesterday. Can I borrow the car to get it? Susan handed over the keys. Don't be too long. We've got the rehearsal dinner at 6. Beth felt guilty about the lie, but this was too important. She wasn't going to Jenny's house. She was going to Tom's apartment. He'd only ever invited them there twice, always making excuses about renovations or claiming his place was too small for visitors. 20 minutes later, Beth parked across the street from Tom's building. Getting inside was easier than she expected. An elderly couple held the door for her, assuming she belonged there. From her 2 previous visits, Beth remembered Tom lived in apartment 512. Outside his door, Beth hesitated. Breaking in would be wrong, not to mention illegal. But then she remembered the photo, the suspicious conversations, the lies. She tried the handle on a whim, and to her shock it turned. The door wasn't locked. Beth stepped inside, heart hammering against her ribs. The apartment looked different from her last visit. Back then, it had felt staged, too perfect, like a furniture store display. Now it looked half-packed. Boxes were stacked near the door, and the walls were bare where pictures had hung before. He's planning to leave, Beth whispered to herself. In the living room, she found what looked like Tom's home office, a desk with a laptop and stacks of folders. Beth quickly flipped through them, finding bank statements, investment accounts, and transfer forms, many with her mother's name or their neighbors' names. Most disturbing was a folder labeled Next Targets, containing information about wealthy widows in a town 2 hours away. Beth pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of everything. Her hands shook as she opened a drawer and found a stack of driver's licenses, all with Tom's face but different names. Thomas Reynolds, Timothy Richards, Theodore Rowe. Oh my God, Beth gasped, photographing these 2. On the laptop screen was an open email confirming a one-way flight reservation for tomorrow night. Hours after the wedding, to a country Beth had barely heard of. Next to it sat a fake passport with yet another name. As Beth was documenting everything, she heard a key in the lock. Panic shot through her. She dove behind the sofa just as Tom walked in, talking on his phone. Everything's set for tomorrow. The wedding's at noon, transfers complete by 3, and I'm on a plane by 8. He laughed. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. The daughter's been a pain, but what's she going to do? She's just a kid. Beth held her breath, trying to make herself as small as possible as Tom moved around the apartment, gathering items and putting them into a suitcase. He seemed to be packing only valuables, expensive watches, small electronics, and documents. It's the biggest score yet, Tom continued on the phone. The mother's life insurance, retirement account, house equity, plus the investments from all her friends. Nearly $500,000 total. Beth felt sick. Her mom had put her dad's life insurance money into Tom's investment fund. That money was supposed to pay for Beth's college someday. After what felt like forever, Tom grabbed his jacket. Gotta run. Meeting the baker woman about adding her accounts too. He left, locking the door behind him. Beth waited a full minute, then scrambled out from her hiding place. She tried the door, locked from the outside. Heart racing, she looked around frantically. The apartment was 5 floors up, so the window wasn't an option. Then she spotted Tom's laptop still open. Maybe she could email someone for help. But who would believe her? What she needed was to get this evidence to her mom before the wedding tomorrow. Beth noticed a small balcony off the bedroom. Looking down, she saw the building's fire escape zigzagging to the ground. It was her only way out. Clutching her phone with its damning evidence, Beth climbed over the railing and began her descent, determined to save her mother from making the biggest mistake of her life. Beth's hands were shaking as she drove home, her mind racing faster than the car. The evidence on her phone felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Pictures of fake IDs, financial documents with her mother's signature, the flight reservation, everything proved Tom was planning to rob them blind and disappear. When she pulled into the driveway, her stomach dropped. Tom's sleek black car was parked there. He had come back early. Beth took a deep breath and walked inside. The sound of laughter hit her immediately. Her mom and Tom in the kitchen, surrounded by cousins who had arrived early for the wedding. There she is. Her mom called, waving her over. We were starting to worry. Did you get your charger from Jenny's? Beth nodded, clutching her phone tightly. Yeah, got it. She looked at Tom, who smiled at her with that perfect, practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Just in time," he said smoothly. "We're about to head to the restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. Why don't you go get changed?" Beth hesitated. She couldn't confront him here, not with everyone watching. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Alone?" Susan frowned slightly. "Can it wait, honey? Everyone's ready to go. It's important." Tom stepped forward, placing his hand on Susan's shoulder. "You two chat. We'll start loading into the cars." He ushered everyone toward the door, playing the perfect host. But as he passed Beth, he whispered, "Don't ruin this for your mother. She deserves to be happy." When everyone had filed out to the cars, Susan turned to Beth with a sigh. "What is it? And please don't tell me you are still worried about Tom." Beth pulled out her phone. "Mom, I found something." "A lot of things, actually. Tom isn't who he says he is." Susan's face hardened. "Not this again." "Just look," Beth said, opening the photos she'd taken. "These are from his apartment today. Look at all these IDs with different names. And here," she swiped to another photo. "Transfer forms with your signature, moving money to accounts you don't know about." Susan grabbed the phone, her expression changing as she scrolled through the images. "Where did you get these? Did you break into his place?" Her voice was rising. "Beth, this is insane. You can't just invade someone's privacy like this." "Mom, he's planning to take your money and run. He has a flight booked for tomorrow night." The kitchen door swung open. Tom stood there, his face a mask of concern. "Everything okay in here?" Susan turned to him flustered. "Tom, Beth has these photos from your apartment," she says. Tom walked over calmly and looked at the phone. For a split second, something dark flickered across his face, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, sweetheart," he said to Susan. "I was going to surprise you after the wedding." Surprise her with what? Stealing her money? Beth couldn't believe he was still trying to lie. Tom sighed deeply. "The different IDs are for a security project I'm working on. The flights are our honeymoon surprise. I was going to tell you tomorrow." He turned to Susan. "I've been planning a special trip for us. That's why I've been moving some funds around." Beth watched in horror as her mother's face softened. "You're taking me on a trip." "Mom, he's lying." Beth grabbed the phone back. "Look at these documents. He's been stealing from you, from the Wilsons, from everyone." Tom placed his arm around Susan. "I think Beth is having a hard time accepting our marriage," he said gently. "The documents she found are investment portfolios I've been managing. And yes, some have your signature because we've been planning our finances together." Susan looked between them, clearly torn. "Tell her about Theodore Rowe," Beth challenged him. "And Timothy Richards. Tell her why you have their driver's licenses." A flash of anger crossed Tom's face before he composed himself. "Those belong to my late father and uncle. I keep them as mementos." "That's not true." Beth felt tears of frustration building. "Mom, please believe me." Susan took a deep breath. "Beth, this has gone too far. You've been against Tom from the beginning, and now breaking into his apartment, taking pictures of his personal things." "But Mom." "No." Susan's voice was firm. "Go get changed for dinner. We'll discuss your punishment later." As Beth stood frozen in disbelief, Tom gave her a look of triumph over her mother's shoulder. In that moment, she knew he would never let her win. The rehearsal dinner was about to start. The wedding was tomorrow, and somehow she had just become the villain in her own home. The rehearsal dinner was a blur for Beth. She sat at the far end of the table, barely touching her food while Tom charmed everyone with stories and jokes. Every few minutes, her mum would glance her way with a look that mixed disappointment and concern. Beth felt completely alone. After dinner, she tried calling Jenny, but her friend didn't pick up. She even thought about talking to her Aunt Donna, but quickly dismissed the idea. Aunt Donna thought Tom hung the moon. When they got home, Beth went straight to her room, ignoring her mum's attempts to talk. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, the evidence still on her phone, but now seemingly useless. Who would believe her when Tom had an answer for everything? A soft knock on her door startled her. "Beth, can I come in?" It was her mom. "Yeah," Beth said, sitting up. Susan entered and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked tired, the excitement from earlier replaced by worry lines around her eyes. "Honey, I know you're upset," she began. "And I understand this is hard for you. having someone new in our lives. This isn't about him being new, Mom, Beth interrupted. It's about him being fake. Everything he says is a lie. Susan sighed. Tom explained about the IDs and the documents. And you believed him, just like that? What am I supposed to believe? That the man I've known for months, who's been nothing but kind and supportive, is suddenly some kind of con artist? Susan ran a hand through her hair. Or that my teenage daughter, who's been against this relationship from day one, broke into his apartment looking for trouble. The words stung, but Beth couldn't give up. Call the airline, she suggested. Ask about the flight he booked. If it's really for your honeymoon, there should be 2 tickets, not 1. Susan hesitated, and for a moment, Beth thought she'd gotten through to her. Tom showed me the confirmation email for our trip, Susan said finally. We're going to Bali. He's been planning it for months as a surprise. Beth's heart sank. He showed you that after I confronted him. That's enough. Susan stood up. Tomorrow is my wedding day, Beth. I'm marrying Tom, and I need you to find a way to accept that. She walked to the door, then turned back. And I want you to apologize to him in the morning. After her mom left, Beth buried her face in her pillow, fighting back tears of frustration. She was running out of options and time. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or things will get worse. T. A chill ran through her. Tom was threatening her now. Beth quickly saved the message as evidence, then froze as a thought struck her. If he was texting threats, maybe there was more she could find. She opened her laptop and searched Thomas Reynolds, financial advisor again, adding fraud to her search terms. Nothing useful came up. She tried the other names from the IDs. Timothy Richards, Theodore Rowe. The third name yielded results. A small news article from a town 3 hours away. Local investors seek answers after financial advisor disappears. The article mentioned Theodore Rowe, who had vanished after collecting investments from several widows and retirees. There was no photo, but the description matched Tom perfectly. Beth's hands shook as she clicked on more articles. In each town, the pattern was the same. A charming financial advisor would appear, build relationships with vulnerable people, collect their money for exclusive investment opportunities, then disappear. She found a Facebook group for victims and sent a message explaining her situation. Within minutes, someone replied asking for a photo. Beth sent one of Tom from her mom's engagement party. The response came quickly. That's him. That's the man who stole my mother's retirement. His name was Patrick Turner when he did it. Beth's phone lit up with message after message from group members, all confirming the same thing. Different names, different towns, but always the same man. Always the same scheme. Her bedroom door creaked, and Beth looked up to see Tom standing in the doorway, his face hard in the dim light. We need to talk, he said, closing the door behind him. Beth's heart hammered against her ribs as Tom closed the bedroom door behind him. She quickly closed her laptop, but from his expression, she knew it was too late. Computer problems? Tom asked, his voice eerily calm. Gone was the charming smile he showed her mother. Now his eyes were cold, calculating. Just homework, Beth lied, sliding her phone under her pillow. The messages from the fraud victims were still open on the screen. Tom walked slowly toward her desk, each step deliberate. You know, I actually liked you, Beth. Smart kid. Protective of your mom. Admirable qualities. He picked up a framed photo of Beth and her mom from her desk. But you just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? My mom deserves to know the truth, Beth said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. Tom set the photo down with a sharp click. And what truth is that? That I make her happy. That for the first time in years, she wakes up excited about her life instead of exhausted from working 2 jobs. You're using her, Beth said, just like you used all those other women. Tom's face darkened. I see you've been busy. He glanced at her laptop. What did you find? Some stories about other men who look like me. Financial advisors who make mistakes. I found people who recognized your face, people you stole from. For a split second, surprise flashed across Tom's features before he regained his composure. People make mistakes all the time. See a photo online, think it's someone they know. Stop lying. Beth stood up, anger temporarily overcoming her fear. I have proof. The IDs, the flight, the bank transfers. I know what you're doing, and I won't let you hurt my mom. Tom's fake smile disappeared completely. Listen carefully, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Tomorrow, your mother becomes my wife. You will stand in that church with a smile on your face. You will say nothing about your ridiculous theories. After the ceremony, I'll handle the banking details, and by evening, everything will be settled. And then you'll disappear with her money, Beth finished for him. Tom didn't deny it. Your mother will be fine. She's strong like you. She'll bounce back. He leaned closer. But if you try to stop this wedding, I'll make sure she loses everything. Her savings, this house, her credit score. I've done it before. Beth felt sick but held her ground. I'll tell everyone what I found. I'll show them the messages from your other victims. Who will believe you? A jealous teenager trying to sabotage her mother's happiness. Tom laughed softly. I've spent months building relationships with your family, your neighbors. To them, I'm the perfect catch, and you're just a problem child. He was right, and Beth knew it. Her own mother hadn't believed her even with evidence. Now, here's what's going to happen, Tom continued. You're going to delete those messages. You're going to forget whatever you think you've discovered. And tomorrow, you're going to smile for the wedding photos. And if I don't? Tom's eyes narrowed. Let's just say I know people who can make life very difficult for you and your mother. People who wouldn't take kindly to losing their investment opportunity. The threat hung in the air between them. Beth's phone buzzed from under her pillow. Another message from one of the victims. Tom's hand shot out, grabbing for it, but Beth was faster. She snatched the phone and backed toward the door. Give me the phone, Beth, Tom demanded, his voice losing its calm edge. No. Beth's mind raced. She needed help, needed someone to believe her. An idea struck her. Her mom's best friend, Diane, was staying at the house for the wedding. If she could just get to Diane's room. Tom lunged forward, grabbing Beth's arm with surprising strength. I'm not playing games anymore. Let go of me. Beth yanked her arm free and bolted for the door, fleeing it open. Tom's face transformed instantly as he saw Susan standing in the hallway, concern etched on her face. Everything okay? I heard shouting, Susan said, looking between them. Just a little disagreement, Tom said smoothly, his charming mask back in place. Right, Beth? Beth looked at her mother, then at Tom, seeing the warning in his eyes. The wedding was tomorrow morning. She had hours, not days, to stop this man from ruining their lives. Mom, Beth said carefully, we need to talk. Right now. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but Beth had barely slept. Last night's confrontation with her mom and Tom had gone nowhere. Susan had listened to Beth's warnings, but ultimately chose to believe Tom's explanations once again. He'd spun the conversation beautifully, turning Beth's accusations into wedding jitters and teenage rebellion. Now Beth sat in her bridesmaid dress, watching her mom get ready in the church's small side room. Susan looked beautiful in her simple white dress, hair pinned up with tiny flowers. You look amazing, Mom, Beth said quietly. Susan met her eyes in the mirror. Thank you, honey. Her voice softened. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I need you to try for me. Beth nodded, her throat tight. She had one last plan, but she couldn't tell her mom. Not yet. Outside the room, guests were arriving. Beth excused herself and slipped into the hallway, phone clutched in her hand. She'd been texting with Diane all morning, showing her the evidence, the messages from Tom's previous victims. At first, Diane had been skeptical, but as more details emerged, she'd started asking questions. Beth spotted Diane talking with her husband near the entrance. Is everything ready? Beth whispered. Diane nodded nervously. He's waiting outside. But Beth, if we're wrong about this. We're not, Beth said firmly. You saw the proof. Guests were being seated as the music started playing. Beth took her place at the front of the church, watching as Tom stood by the altar, looking confident in his expensive suit. Their eyes met, and he gave her a warning look before turning his attention to the back of the church. The wedding march began. Everyone stood as Susan appeared in the doorway, glowing with happiness. Beth felt a pang of guilt. Her mom deserved this joy, just not with a man who was planning to steal everything from her. As Susan reached the halfway point down the aisle, the church doors opened again. A tall man in a suit entered, accompanied by two uniformed police officers. Whispers erupted throughout the church. The music faltered and stopped. Susan froze in confusion. "What's going on?" Tom demanded, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent church. The man in the suit stepped forward. Thomas Reynolds, or should I say Theodore Rowe? Or perhaps Patrick Turner? He held up a badge. "Detective Wilson, Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you some questions." Tom's face drained of color. His eyes darted to the side exit, then back to Susan, who stood frozen in the aisle. "There's been a mistake," Tom said loudly, his charm cranked to maximum. "This is my wedding day." "This man is wanted in 3 states for fraud and theft," Detective Wilson announced. "We have victims who've identified him, and evidence of his latest scheme right here in this town." One of the officers moved toward Tom, who suddenly lunged toward Susan, grabbing her arm. "Tell them this is ridiculous," he hissed at her. "Tell them." Susan pulled away, shock and confusion washing over her face. "Tom, what are they talking about?" Beth hurried to her mother's side. "Mom, remember what I showed you? The different names, the flight booking. It's all true." As if on cue, several people stood up from the pews, strangers Beth had only seen in profile pictures until now. Tom's previous victims, who had driven through the night after Beth contacted them. "That's him," a gray-haired woman called out. "He took my sister's entire retirement fund." "He was engaged to my mother when he emptied her accounts," another added. Tom's eyes darted around wildly as more accusations flew. Suddenly, he shoved Susan aside and made a dash for the side door. One of the officers moved to intercept him, but Tom was quick. He knocked over a flower arrangement, causing the officer to slip. "He's getting away," someone yelled. The second officer gave chase as Tom burst through the door into the parking lot. Beth and several guests rushed after them, spilling outside just in time to see Tom trying to start his car. Police cars blocked the parking lot exits. Tom abandoned his car and took off running across the church lawn. That's when Aunt Donna, always the athlete in the family, stuck out her foot as he passed. Tom went down hard, face first into the grass. The officer was on him in seconds, handcuffs clicking into place as Tom struggled and shouted threats. Beth found her mother standing in the church doorway, wedding dress smudged, eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Beth said, wrapping her arms around her. Susan hugged her back fiercely. "No, I'm sorry and I didn't believe you." She watched as the police loaded Tom into a cruiser. "You saved me, Beth. You saved all of us." As the police car drove away, guests surrounded them with support and amazement at what had unfolded. The wedding was ruined, but something more important had been saved: truth, trust, and their future together.